Welcome to another edition of Global Conversations. My guest today is Vanessa Guazzeli Paim, a respected astrologer, writer, and speaker on astrology and at astrology conferences worldwide, as well as a practicing psychoanalyst and psychologist. Now, the topic for this show will seem maybe a little strange for most of you, but I've never paid much attention to astrology, but I do not discount it. I just don't read my astrology chart every day in the newspaper, but I believe that the universe is infinite and really beyond our comprehension. It does not seem too far-fetched to me to think or believe that the planets and their configuration and their alignment would have an effect on people and movements and historical events. So this topic really isn't too much out of the scope of this show, because the belief that the positioning of the planets has had an effect on geopolitics. It's not like it's a new fad. It's been around since the second millennium BC. Vanessa, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Regis. A pleasure to be here with you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. You're my first guest from Brazil. It's a brand new country. Actually, it's not a continent, but South America is, and I've never had anybody on. So you're the first from Brazil and from South America. Now, I read a very extensive article. It was an interview that Pepe Escobar did of you. And I pretty much followed the outline of that article for what I want to cover in the show today, but I'm going to try to keep it really simple. In that interview, you stated that Jupiter and Saturn conjunction, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which happened or will happen tomorrow, December 21st, last year and a year ago, that it represents the ultimate game changer, and you call it the Great Mutation. Could you explain for me what that means?
Sure. So that conjunction, tomorrow is going to be 1 year since that conjunction happened, but it's a major cycle. So it's really very present still, because it concerns a cycle of 200 years or even 800 years. We can relate because of the specifics of how this conjunction happened. And what is this conjunction about? So it happened a year ago, and is one of the aspects that marks the transition of the world system, the change of the world system that we are currently experiencing. And that particular conjunction is called traditionally in astrology, the Great Mutation, because these planets, Saturn and Jupiter, they are the furthest planets that are still visible to the human eye. Yeah, before Uranus and Neptune and Pluto were discovered, they were then the reference in traditional astrology to be able to mark greater periods of time and therefore collective periods. Yeah, things that relate somehow to a larger extent, so to the collective experience. And the Great Mutation is the cycle of 200 years, when the conjunctions of these planets that meet every 36 years, but when they change the element where the conjunction happens, that is a Great Mutation. That speaks of a different cycle that we are entering socially, politically.
Wow. You talk about the great dimension in time and collective context. Is that what you were just talking about? Sometimes 200, 800 years and now 32 years? And what does Jupiter signify? And what does Saturn signify in terms of astrology?
Okay, so sorry, it's 20 years for these two to conjunct. Another aspect that we'll be talking about, Saturn, Neptune, that's 36 years. But so these planets, Jupiter has Jupiter is the signifier of law. Saturn is the signifier of order. Okay, just to put it very simple. So they will speak of the expansion in society, Jupiter, and at the same time, and what is then the rule, the orientation, and Saturn will speak of the structures in society. So that's a very social pairing that we have. And then we have the trans-Saturnian planets, which are Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which will also help us understand yet bigger cycles. And they are also related to the aspects we are having during this period of between 2020 to 2026. Okay, and of course it will keep on reverberating, but this period is crucial in this transition.
Okay, so you talked about the end of a cycle. Now, does that imply that the current cycle of law and order is ending and we're going to transition to something new? My ignorance is really showing now, but I'm just trying to understand this.
Of course. So yes, we are in a transition of the very world system. Okay, so the rules and at the same time the power structures. Yeah, so this is a major transition, and super important to say that this specific aspect that is connected to then a few other major aspects between 2020 and 2026, but this one specifically, which is major, it does very much connect to China's astrological chart. So without going into too many astrological details that would get you perhaps a bit confused and would take us a bit longer to explain, I'll try to bring more directly a bit with some mentions of the astrological data, but more directly, what does that mean? What am I referring to in our experience and in the geopolitical chessboard? So we do see a movement of an enhancement of China's power, of course. No, this is becoming more and more obvious. And it's gonna keep on growing as Pluto is gonna go into Aquarius in 2023 and 2024. That's the ingress of Pluto into Aquarius, a very long cycle. And it will conjunct also that ascendant of China's chart and the moon of China. So this speaks of an enhancement of power to China, but not only to China, because other aspects also relate very much to Russia. And it's very interesting how we do have an aspect that relates very much to, in fact, to socialism and communism historically. There's this one aspect that is usually considered by many astrologers that deal with world affairs. That's because we observe that, because that is the cycle. Actually, we observe how the conjunctions of Saturn and Neptune mark significant moments connected to socialism and to communism. Okay, for instance, the October Revolution, the beginning of the Soviet Union. The Communist Manifesto was written actually during such a conjunction as well. And the fall of the Berlin Wall also happened with that conjunction, but with the addition of Uranus, a disruptive planet, in conjunction to them as well. Okay, so in the same sign as them as well. So there was a dismantling. But then the next one is going to happen. It's going to be even more significant, because it will happen in the very first degree of the whole zodiac, 0 degree of Aries. That's something so rare. Okay, I looked back thousands of years, okay, like 5,000 years back, 3,000 years ahead, researching the astrological data. And that is something really hard to find. It takes very long time to even get close to that. It takes a long time. So, and that marks a beginning, and that marks the conception, a new conception of reality, a very new conception of reality. So that aspect happens in February 2026. And it's interesting because, what am I saying here? No, I'm saying that there's something that relates to socialism, to communism, not necessarily, and actually not the previous experiences, but really a renewing way of experiencing that, of doing socialism, okay? But this is really on the rise, something that is connected, but a possible upgrade there. And it does very much relate to Russia's history, of course. And when President Putin in Munich, in his speech in Munich in 2007, he, in February 2007, he did propose the Eurasia integration. Yeah, and that was also during a connection between these two planets that refer then to these things that I am talking about, Saturn and Neptune. So analyzing this intertwining of data and historical facts and the astrological facts, what I do find is this emergence of China as a very strong power, a dominant power, but at the same time also a strong highlight to Russia. And we know that this partnership, the strategic partnership, is enhancing more and more. And an interesting thing as well is that Putin and Xi Jinping, they both have that conjunction in their charts. Okay, they both have that conjunction. So that means that they relate well to this transition that we are having in 2026. They have a strong relation to that moment in some way or another. They are somehow contributing to that transition, which is going to be complex. I'm not saying that, you know, but it's a complex time, and we'll have many different, not necessarily many, but we'll have a few different approaches to that around the world. In the West, I do see that some reinvention is going to have to come around, you know, but there is a thirst for a different system, no? And at the same time, a system that's trying to reset itself in an even harsher way, yeah? That we know then with the Great Reset, no, and the whole scheme that's going on in trying to control more and more people in the world, and in the West in a very harsh way. Especially in Europe, we can see that already, but it's a very pernicious way that it's also happening in other places, but not as explicit, no, but in Australia as well. And so what I was saying about Xi and Putin, okay, having that aspect in their charts, well, the combination of their charts then has another highlight, which is Sun conjunct Pluto. This is power. This is rulers with power. Together, they are stronger. Together, they are really a power to be reckoned with, really. You know? So this is an interesting move there, though we know there are many complexities, and there's the geopolitical level, but there's the, what should we call it, the metapolitics level of those maneuvers by the billionaires, you know, and how the powers behind powers can operate and can also try and manipulate powers as well, no, those in official power positions. So it's a very complex game, no, in this transition, but it's inevitable. There's an inevitable transition, as we are seeing, no, because also, well, I keep on going, so I don't want to know if you have any
Now,
questions.
let me jump in. I want you to clarify a couple of things. First of all, in one sense, what you're saying is not new to me. I have had many people who never mentioned the word astrology or charts or anything like that, who said there's something happening in the universe that signifies fundamental change. And we are moving into this new era, or as you say, cycle. So that's not new to me. I've heard that, but I go, well, I don't know. Do these people have dreams, or, you know, what's their reference point? Now, the second thing I want to mention, and this is a question, it would seem, well, some people, I think, believe that something dramatic, sudden, is going to happen this year, by the end of the year, or early next year. But these cycles, do they have, do things happen suddenly and dramatically, or are they slow and painful?
Both things happen. Okay, both things happen. There are some things that are slow and sometimes painful, and there are other things that can be sudden. For instance, all astrologers knew, though many were trying to kind of, you know, soften the information, but we did know there was a major transition to come in 2020. We knew that for years, because we had such a gathering of planets, what we call a stellium, in the sign of Capricorn, which is the sign of structures. So really heavy duty combination of planets. And especially in March, it was like super full on concentration. And that's when the pandemic was declared, you know, and the lockdowns began and so on. So we didn't know all the specifics, but we did know something major and something that would have already a reference to the change of the world system somehow. Different astrologers would kind of interpret it in different ways, but we knew that the socio-economic cycle was about to change. Okay, that was, and I actually started to speak about it, about the change of the world system, really. Okay, before that, I have an article that I wrote 2 months before that, which registered that information. I was speaking about it before, but there's an article addressing that from January 2020, that we were at the very end of the world as we knew it, and that the new moment would come by the end of the year with this great mutation at 0 degree of Aquarius. But the thing is that it's a super complex transition. And yes, we do have some moments that are a little more delicate. And in many ways, and there are those things that are really, that can operate in a very pernicious way, really. And we have one of such aspect happening in April, next April, okay? Which is Jupiter conjunct Neptune in Pisces. This is like, think about Pisces is like the ocean, okay? It's Poseidon, Neptune, Poseidon, the ocean, expanded by Jupiter. Those are the two rulers of Pisces. It's something like massive oceanic thing. So we can think about also the enchantment, the possibility of illusions and intoxication and contamination. And at the same time, the flip side is the possibility of imagining new realities, because one very important thing in this process is we need to preserve our imaginary, to defend it from all the abuses this current collapsing system is trying to impose, including the metaverse thing, you know, of really like killing the imaginary, you know, and trying to actually do this direct passage from the real to the imaginary, but in a very like a rape to the imaginary of people. And to be able to preserve our capacity to imagine and to create, in the sense that we conceive, what realities do we conceive? Yeah, I'm not saying this in a woke way, but really in how we conceive. So what do we actually create for ourselves, in the sense that we head towards that. We conceive that that's possible for us. So this is very important in this moment in time, but at the same time, there's that possibility of illusion of masses, and the whole scheme with the imposition of vaccines with no security, with no guarantee of them not hurting people. And as we know, actually, many people do report, but you cannot show that, no. But I know I should be careful with terms here, no? But we know that this is a very complicated thing, and especially regarding children now, to take care of the kids. And that's because of another astrological point, which is Black Moon Lilith going to Cancer, related to children and family and intimacy. So there's something about people, some people being really deluded, and at the same time the possibility of many people realizing that somehow they were invaded by something perhaps not so nice and not so cozy and not so caring.
Yeah, I want to jump in here. You're starting to talk my language now, because I've been paying attention to geopolitical events for quite some time, and it's the focus of many guests on this show. You mentioned Putin and Xi, and it is an alliance. We don't have to mince around with words. It's an alliance. It's very clear. They're just not saying that that's what it is. But in all areas, in terms of politics, in terms of technology, in terms of even military, Xi has promised to support Putin if anything happens in the Middle East, or if anything happens in the Ukraine. So that point struck me. I was hoping to hear something like that, quite frankly. And the other thing is that the change, the slow and gradual change to socialism. It appears to me that people around the world are waking up that capitalism is on its last legs. In fact, it was Marx who said, I think it was Marx, I sometimes confuse him with Lenin, but fascism is the final stage of capitalism. And that's in fact what we're seeing all over the planet with this totalitarian control of our lives, the denial of personal freedoms, etc. So you're really hitting on some incredible points that I've been covering, but obviously never from the point of view that the planets have something to do with this. The other thing you mentioned was the vaccine. You don't have to worry about saying the word vaccine, because my shows are published on other platforms that don't censor for any of that. So you don't have to be afraid to talk about that. So I'm looking here at the next point, and it's kind of overwhelming for me, but what has this got to do with the United States empire? And it is an empire. It probably is the greatest, most destructive, most feared empire in the history of the planet. Rome didn't come close. So what can you say about what's happened? We talk about a change in cycle. Obviously, I think you must be referring to the cycle of capitalism. And a lot of people are talking about socialism, not just because there's that form of socialism in China, and Russia knows what that's all about. Even though Russia today is a very capitalist country, they still have a lot of social values. Talk to me a little bit about what this is going to mean for the United States empire.
Okay, so yeah, United States is having in 2022 its Pluto return, which is a massive return. Okay, just to give you an idea, every birthday we have our solar return. Okay, 1 year, it's already something very significant. It renews not only because, oh, it's the date, we remember that we were born, people give us their greetings and stuff, but it's really, we are renewed with solar energy, because the sun is right conjunct our very original natal sun. Okay, so planets return to their place in the zodiac. Okay, but that takes different periods, and Pluto to return is about 240 years. In this case, 245 to 6 years. Okay, so this is something for a country to have, that is really significant. It's not something that a human being nowadays, at least, can live up to, that, to have a Pluto return. So it's a major cycle, it's a major return, but it's not the solar return of a birthday. It's the Pluto return. And what is Pluto? Pluto is Hades, the ruler of the underworld. And it's very much to do with power. And it has two possibilities: either destruction or transformation. There's no way out. When Pluto hits us with aspects, we do undergo inevitably transformations. Okay.
When you say we, you mean the world, the planet Earth.
We people, when we have not a Pluto return, but a Pluto aspect, okay, it's already something super significant. It talks about like some strong transformation happening in life. Okay, so for a whole country then to have this Pluto return is this whole thing, like the crisis of losing its power position in the world. At the same time, yes, still being obviously a major power, but the transition is inevitable already. It's inevitable. No, you're in America and you know better than I do. I did live in the States, and but we know that the situation. I have very dear people in the States, people that are family to me, and that's nothing to do with, obviously, with like the people, but we know that the empire is what I've been calling a perverse empire. It's a perverse empire. So that I am saying as a psychoanalyst. Okay, it's really, it operates as a perverted way of existing. Yeah. So it's what we in psychoanalysis we call perversion, which is this very manipulative way of dealing with things, which is abusive. And that's precisely how it operates. Like I could, in fact, I am doing that study, to point out like the how it really is. If you look into narcissistic abuse and what the state as an empire has been doing to the world, like it's totally correlatable. So, but then what's the story? What's to be done? Well, a major transformation has to take place. There's an urge for it, and it's quite peculiar to observe something that happened when Biden and Harris came into power. Because I am not a fan of Bernie Sanders, okay, but it's really something quite peculiar that in that scene, the most socialism relatable member in that scene, okay, the perhaps the only one that, well, he says he's a socialist, okay, so the only element that could be related to socialism in that scene was the one that went viral with those memes, those very funny memes, with Bernie Sanders with his gloves and stuff. And I was laughing so much because it was really like, wow, how peculiar that from that scene that was quite bizarre with those shows and so much that was, I won't even go into that, but it was quite a bizarre scene to watch, that whole show. And then actually the socialist element there is what went viral. That was something that did catch my attention. as a symbol, you know. I'm very observant of symbols, no, as an astrologer, as a psychoanalyst. So that really caught my attention. And it's really, we know that there's this thirst in the US for change, you know, from the people really that are going through not such easy times around the world in general, but in the States as well. Now we know. And it's harsh because that's not how it was, no, in the States. Not for everyone, you know, at least. So how life has become more precarious for so many, you know. But the thing is then that there's the Pluto return, which has three major exact hits, as we say, you know, the exact aspect happening. The first one in February, the second one in July, and the third one in December. But throughout the year, it's going to be very present anyway, because the orb, which is the distance of the degree, is going to be very close anyway. So it's really, the whole year is this Pluto return. It's something that reverberates. Now it has been coming and it's still going to reverberate after that. And then there are some other astrological details that indicate how this is really not an easy year for the United States. But the thing is that it's also dangerous for others around, because it's like a kind of like this beast that is dying or collapsing or in need of transformation, but that's doing everything it can, you know, to survive. And so in its own ways, right? So this thing of the rule of law and the whole thing with how they've been operating with, well, there's international law. And then how they operate, you know, now I've got the expression. Oh my God, it's rule-based.
Rule-based order. Rule-based order.
Rule-based order, right? So instead of, well, there's international law, as simple as that. But they try to dodge the law and try to impose the rules. This is really perversion. No, dodging the law that actually is something that everyone has to abide by. Everyone, even the judge. The judge has to abide by the law to be able to be a judge, no? So they want to be the judge, the policeman, but they are not submitting to their own rules, no? So, and this is really not gonna be possible that it goes on. So a very interesting thing is how now Russia has brought the proposal and in fact the ultimatum for that there's law, to bring law into the conversation in a more consistent way. Like it's time to end that manipulation, you know. It's like, hey, there's law and this has to be respected.
Yeah, let me jump in here, Vanessa. Boy, law and order. You know, growing up in America, it was all about law and order. We are a country founded on law, based on law. When you look at what's happening in the United States now, the law has been turned on its head. The Constitution has been turned on its head. Courts at all levels are making decisions not based on the law, but based on politics. I mean, they're all somehow bought off, paid, or corrupted, whatever. And then when you talk about order, and you look at what's happening in the United States, my country, there is no order. The country is frayed. It's falling apart. It's lost its moral compass. If it had any spirituality, it's gone. People are adrift, and not just adrift, but fighting against each other. So you have these two things, the way I've been looking at it, and not thinking in astrological terms, but law and order have been turned on their heads. They do not exist in the United States of America right now. And one can only hope that out of that, the crash and burn will arise a phoenix in some kind of a new reality. I mean, I've always looked at it that way, but not in astrological terms.
Well, in astrological terms, that is a very Pluto-related reference, the phoenix. So that's what the American people should be aiming for. but
Yeah.
really from the inside out. There will need to be a purge. I have no idea how this can even happen, because we know the whole system is so intricate, it's so complex. No, the maneuvers of power, those behind it, you know, the billionaire structures of manipulation of power. So we know it's complex, but it has to come from the inside out. It really has to come from the inside out. And it's about this possibility of conceiving another reality. This is something that we got to keep on working on.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that only a few people, and it could be millions, could be a billion, in the world right now have the ability to think of these things, to conceive of these new things? Because it seems to me that the overwhelming majority do not have a clue. You can't even talk to them about this. What is your thought on that?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the country I am in right now, yeah, and it's where I was born. I've lived in many different continents throughout my life, but the place I am in and where I was born, Brazil, is like people are absolutely clueless. Absolutely clueless. You know, the left, for instance, is woke left, I think 99%, if not more. You know, it's like very rare to actually find people that do have a clue of what's going on. And in so many other places, no, that's super complex. But the thing is that the ones that keep at it, the ones that keep on perceiving what they're perceiving, and when possible, speaking about it and bringing that into reality, you know, the acknowledgement of reality into the experience of reality with others as well. This is so important. And this has an effect. This is not something that is effectless. No, it has an effect, and it's crucial. It seems like perhaps at times like even pointless it can seem, but it's not. It's really not. And there's something connected to that, which is the what I mentioned as the black moon spell, no, which is because there's this point in astrology. If I can go into that, I don't know if you want to jump in.
No, I was going to ask you about what is that?
So the black moon spell, what's the black moon? The black moon is actually an astrological point which indicates the apogee of the moon. It's not another astrological body, but it's a point related to the moon's orbit. But it's super significant because it's about the relation between the moon and the earth. So the closest astral body to earth, which is the moon. Okay, so it's a very intimate, it's about a very intimate thing. It's really about, it stays in a sign for 9 months. So it does relate to the very formation of a body, of a human body. So it's very visceral. It's this point that relates also to our instinctual drives and to our survival instincts and to the body itself. So the thing is, this point is the one that can tell us of how the manipulation at this more visceral level happens. Okay, this is the interesting thing about it, is because we can look into it and observe how people can be manipulated to a level that it's not merely rational. It's very good that we bring the rational perspective, to bring in words, to bring in discernment. It's crucial. But we realize that it's not only about that, because people can even realize that things are, they block it, right? It's like obvious, like intelligent people that would otherwise be able to discern some things, and they are blocking it. They don't want to realize it because the fear that has been driving them, the more visceral sensations and fears that are driving them, you know, they just take over. It's a survival thing. So, for instance, when Black Moon Lilith conjuncted Neptune, the sign of illusions, and also other beautiful things, but the sign of illusions, okay? Black Moon conjuncted Neptune, the ruler of that sign there. It was a very, very powerful thing. I didn't know what was going on exactly. I was aware there were many protests going around in the world. There was September, October 2019. I was aware there were many protests happening around the world, like enhancing how people were really not coping anymore with many different things and different contexts in different countries, but people were just restless. And at the same time, Joker, the movie, came, and I was really observing, like, yeah, but this is so major, like, what's going on? Well, later on, we came to know that at that moment in October 2019, Event 201 happened.
Whoa.
Simulating the pandemic. No, in a confluence of dedication from the World Economic Forum, Bill Melinda Gates Foundation, and John Hopkins Institute. So they simulated the pandemic right then. And then, so Black Moon kept on going in Pisces. And then it had in January, end of January, it had, when actually the situation started to become a bit like, oh, what's going on? What's this situation happening? What is this virus, this thing going on? Well, then Black Moon Lilith entered the sign of Aries, which is a very active sign. So Black Moon Lilith in Aries, just to give you an idea, it's like Bruce Lee. It's like action, like sharp, right on the money, spot on, immediate response. Okay, it's like Zakharova. It's Michael Jackson dancing. It's like very instant, sharp action. And but at that ingress, which is a significant moment, the transition moment, there was a square between the ruler Mars and Neptune. I don't want to get too astrological here, but with the terms, but what was that? That was like a warrior, like a sharp warrior being, receiving like an anesthesia, or suddenly being like someone put something in his drink, and then he was there was suddenly a fog, and he was not really at his best, and how could he go on? So it's like having to become a ninja, not just a good warrior, but really a ninja to be able to get through the fog. And so that's how it happened. And then action, it was would be a moment usually for action, the drive to act like people were on the streets, So that was kind of already connecting. So, but then it was like the anesthesia, the contagion, the fear of contagion. So the inaction, the impossibility of movement. But it was still a lot about that, like, wanting to move and not being able to move, and all of that, and people getting angry at times, with the whole situation, but having to succumb to it in many ways, and some fighting it. And then by October 2020, it ingressed into Taurus. Okay, I'm just going to doing this if it's okay, if we have time for that, because it's interesting to observe like what was going on, at this deeper level of experience, not the elaborated official narratives. That's significant to consider, but there's this more visceral level of how the bodies are experiencing it. So by October, end of October, it moved into Taurus, and as it moved into Taurus, what was the situation? Well, then the economic, Taurus relates to, is an earth sign related to economics and finance and survival and food, and comfort and security. And also Black Moon Lilith in Taurus has to do with how the body is formed, how the energy is molded in the body, the flow of energy. Just to give you an idea, it's William Reich's NATO position, okay, which he spoke about the armor of energy in the body, how when energy is repressed, it can be both a repression, a physical repression that causes you to experience your body in a different way, in a specific way, but also the psychological effects of it. And by then we had the whole thing with like having your mouth covered and don't touch, don't come close, don't gather, be afraid of another's body. No, be afraid for your body, your safety, the conservation of your body, of your survival, but molded, no? So this operating in the body. Then by July this year, 2021, it transitioned into Gemini. And there it did also with some tense aspects that relate. I had spoken about it like 6 months before, how that moment would somehow relate to the to how we relate to another, how we perceive another, and how it can be like, oh, the danger of another. And that's when the increase on the narrative of who is vaccinated, who isn't vaccinated began. In France, very strong movement, now then Italy, and so on. But so that started to, I was actually in the beginning, when I first saw it some months before, I was thinking like, oh, this is like something that could be slightly related to Nazism in the sense of the of prejudice, you know. And so I was thinking what was gonna happen, you know, something about racism or what, but no, then it was really the vaxxed and the unvaxxed. And also Black Moon Lilith in Gemini is Voltaire's Black Moon Lilith, is Copernicus' Black Moon Lilith. It's about daring to speak your mind, to say your truth, to question. So the importance of that, and on the other side of the coin, well, the manipulation and the censorship. It's also Augusto Pinochet's his legacy now has apparently ended in Chile, you know, at this moment now with the new election, let's see. But so Augusto Pinochet, the dictator that was super harsh on censorship in Chile, bizarre, like people were so accustomed that I've been to Chile a couple of times, had very significant experiences there, and it's amazing how the censorship stayed in them, you know, even for a long period of time. It was like daring to speak in the public space. Astrologers there wouldn't dare to do public gatherings for ages, and there was no prohibition. It took them ages to then do it in a university, and I was present. It was a very significant moment, but for them it was like being able to speak out, you know. So that whole complexity, and at the same time, yes, daring to speak, daring to say it, daring to dodge the censorship and finding ways to say things, and that becomes even creative, right? It becomes even, there's a beauty to it because we learn to say things in a more elaborated, clever way, you know. But so, and now the next transition, this is still very much on the agenda now on our current context, and of course it's not going to be gone, but this is the emphasis now. But then there comes another emphasis, which is the transition to Cancer in April, and that's about, well, as I said before, children, and also about intimacy and about belonging, and more of an emotional security and belonging to a country, to a home, and then what's not really good, you know, in at home, or in the living situation of people, or the family context that's going to emerge, but also the sense of like, oh, where do I belong? And you know, also also belonging to a nation, that's also relatable to that. So that whole thing of like, oh, what's the government really doing? You know, for some people, I think some are going to wake up with that. That's what happened. That transition from Gemini to Cancer is what happened when Edward Snowden revealed the NSA scam, the NSA invasion to our privacy, to our intimacy, you know. So during the Black Moon Lilith in Gemini, which is the one we have now, he was gathering the information. So, and then he brought it out on the very same day when there was the transition into Cancer, which is intimacy. And then suddenly the whole world was aware that there was no privacy. No, so this is going to have something similar, of course, not the exact same, but that has a similarity to what's going to be in April. But of course, we know many people are still going to be, you know, buying into it and submitting, also because of that fear of the need to belong, to feel secure and to feel emotionally secure.
Yeah, wow. All right, so you're talking about next year, 2022. Are we going to survive to get into 2022?
Yeah.
What do you see coming in 2022 that the world is going to experience, that individuals are going to experience?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, these are super strong times. Okay, so we know that, but there is a way to connect to a better vibration, to a better dimension of things. And of course, to keep ourselves sane. We know how the challenges of these times, no, but it's important to know that yes, we are gonna go through it. Okay, we are gonna go through it and we will survive. It's not like the whole earth is gonna end. No, that I can guarantee. Okay, it's not the whole earth's gonna end. But these are complex times. For instance, now the situation in Ukraine. By the way, I am so happy you were talking about like first time you were interviewing someone in South America. Well, I'm super thrilled to be talking to Russia and to be talking to Crimea. You know, it's and to you. I've been enjoying, you know, getting to know you, coming into contact with you, but it's really nice to also be talking to Crimea and to Russia. And so it is a super complex time. Also the context between the border with Belarus, that point has an astro pinpoint there that it is a dangerous context there. Okay, something could be triggered there. I've been observing NATO's chart and the EU chart, and it's tough for the people. No, that's not surprising, but yeah, it's I can see it in the chart how a challenge it is for the people in the EU in super challenging times. For NATO, the danger is that it's still going, you know, it's still like this driving beast, you know, clueless beast, very clueless, but it's still with that drive, with that destructive drive. And NATO has its Jupiter in conjunction to that Pluto of the US. So it's about the expansion of the US's power. That's literally that. Jupiter expansion, Pluto power. That's the connection. So it's going to be a key arm of the empire, no, the tentacles of the empire. But at the same time, so and for that, the most delicate moments are, well, now it is a delicate moment. Now it is now a delicate moment. But also in May and June are quite delicate. Regarding then the possibility of more harsh direct war scenario, but it's already like super delicate. But the thing is that there is this possibility of we must tune into this aspect that relates to the comprehension of things, which is Jupiter Neptune. So the comprehension of things, to be able to comprehend, you know, and to imagine another possible reality. And at the same time, the thing of law, no? Law in that sense, no? Also in face of the imposition of order, of abusive order, to be able to bring in the law, this affirmation of law, which is what really dismantles perverse abuse, is bringing in the law. The real law, I mean, no? The real law, the one that's fair, that's truly fair to whomever it's fair.
Well, you know, you mentioned Ukraine, the Donbass, Belarus, could probably include Iran, Israel. You talked about, you looked at the charts for NATO and the EU. Both of them are fragmenting. They're really being torn apart. There's so much disagreement within NATO. NATO countries don't want to go along with all of the aggression. The same thing in the EU. They're suffering terribly, just like they are in the United States. The social fabric of what were sovereign, independent nations has been either shredded or just painted over with the stroke of one brush, one color. They're having economic difficulties. You know, right now, the whole issue of energy, gas to heat their homes, you know, that the EU doesn't want to let people get gas from Nord Stream 2 from Russia. These are things that I've been aware of. I mean, I've been watching these things now for quite a long time, and a lot of people have around the world. But this is the first time where, and it's hard for me still to comprehend how all of this is connected to astrology, astrological charts, the position of the planets. And I have to go back to one thing, Vanessa. I worked in a hospital for a number of years, and the power of the moon, whenever there was a full moon, the emergency rooms were filled with all kinds of things, from violent crime to heart attacks to emotional issues, whatever. And people would kid about it. And people in the hospital industry would say, it's a full moon, it's got to be. And the other thing is, the moon, as we know, has an enormous gravitational pull on the planet, on people, us, and the oceans, the seas. That's how we get the tides. And so it's not too far removed to think that all of the planets, in fact, everything in the universe is having this kind of pull and tug and effect on everything in the universe, including us, because we're just one little tiny speck. And we tend to think we're the center of it all. But it's not hard for me to conceive now, after speaking with you and thinking in these terms, how everything affects us. And everything we do affects everything else. And I want to come back to one point. You mentioned that we are living in delicate times. I would say very dangerous times, from not just war, not just from civil war, not just from social and economic fragmentation, strife, but people themselves. And not just because of COVID. I think COVID was a big injection that just amped it up, that put it on steroids, that people are feeling, well, we know it from psychologists and what they're telling us. Psychological, mental illnesses have increased exponentially. Suicides, teenage suicides increased exponentially. I don't even have to get into the suicides of United States veterans and even active military people. There's supposedly 21 a day. Any objective observer that can comprehend this whole reality has got to say, wait a second, something here is really wrong. It's not right. It's out of balance. And here's my last question. Should people be afraid? I mean, people are afraid right now of each other and the vaccine and everything, but should people be afraid of transitioning into a new reality?
No, and let me explain why. Yes, these are dangerous times, delicate and dangerous. but the delicate bit is really when it gets people at this more personal level, and how they are driven and how they are experiencing the reality, right? How each of us is experiencing our reality. And this is the thing, like if we are just in fear, we are, even if we don't comply because of fear, as many do, but that's not the way to go, that's not the direction we should be heading. It's a moment to really keep our bodies lively as much as possible, comforted, and do what we must to be able to feel that we actually feel as safe as possible, as comforted as possible. And at the same time as vibrant as possible. And that's not the energy around the world, that's not the vibration around the world. It's really to really scare and get people really diminishing in energy and in action and in vibration and in expression. It's not it's not like, oh, party time, easy going. It's not like that. But the more lively we can maintain ourselves and connect to the good things that exist in life, that make life worth living, to really connect to that. This is so important. Not so easy, at times, but it's so important. Yes, looking into reality, seeing what's going on. It's very important to be aware of that. No, not as some say, oh, if I can't do anything about it, I don't want to know. No, every little light, every candle that's lit, every person that knows what's going on, even if you don't do anything, just if you are aware, that's a light that's turned on. So, and then, the let's say the collective consciousness, is it's at a different place. So the more people can know what's going on, and at the same time, find the conditions as much as possible to be more lively, to be connected to the life force in us, not to the death drive, but to the life drive in us.
All right. I wish we could have ended on that note, but I have to ask you one more thing. If we're talking about the dawning of Aquarius, you've mentioned that, a new cycle, a new age, the age of Aquarius, where does
age, but a time of Aquarius,
a time of Aquarius, where does the Great Reset come into this? Charles Schwab, World Economic Forum, the Great Reset, which he's saying is going to happen next year. How does that fit in? Is this the change we're looking at? Is this what we can expect?
This is what they're trying to do. This is one possibility, okay? As Emmanuel Wallerstein has said, when you're at a transition, we are at a transition of the world system, things are very volatile, no? So it's like anything can happen, and it's not defined yet. We're right in the middle of this transition, so it's not defined what's going to win. But every little thing at such times, because the chessboard is unstable, so every little move will make a difference. Yeah. So every little thing has a greater effect than when things are stable. You can do a lot and perhaps nothing moves. But when things are unstable, every little thing matters. So, and right now, this movement that just happened now, with one of the aspects related to this transition, to the breaking of the structures, and this kind of like this fight between the old and the new in different ways, yeah? The conservation of life and the destruction of life, or the old system trying to just reset itself in a harsher way, or a new possibility of existing in the world in a better reality. So we are in the middle of this fight, and they are trying to do the Great Reset because, and I have no doubt that someone in that project is aware that we are going through the great mutation. because they put that name and they place the event right next to it the next month, right? So it's really like trying to reset instead of mutate, but we got to keep on aiming for the mutation, because the life force is stronger, but it takes perseverance. It does take perseverance from all of us. I mean, I could go on with so many details, but
Well, Vanessa, I hope you'll come back on the show again, because I would like to continue the discussion in a little bit more detail as I begin to grasp the complexity of this. But I want to thank you very much for coming on the show. This is, on the one hand, not been too surprising for me, but also, yeah, surprising. And I think I learned a lot. So thank you very much. And we'll look forward to having you back again.
Thank you. A pleasure to be with you. A pleasure to be back with you as well.